Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony Glenn, and welcome to the SITREP podcast, where we help you win. And today I have a special guest, Temecula's unknown wealthy, Arlin Travis. I'm super excited to have you. I really appreciate you being here today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. This is a beautiful day in Temecula. I feel good. Feel good. Oh, that one.
You can't hear me? Okay, we're going to redo or we're going to keep rolling? Okay, all right, good. Cut.
That's all right. You gotta.
It happens. Let me know when to go. Okay. All right, so without further ado, thank you for coming to the show. I really appreciate you being here today. So I have a lot of questions to unpack. Okay, so who is Arlin Travis?
Okay, well, that's complicated. I love that answer. You'll see people. Oh, it's complicated. It's so who is Arlin Travis? Arlin Travis is different than Arlin Travis when he was 20 years old, when he was 40 years old. Mm-hmm. Now he's 60 years old. And I had a massive heart attack. And as a result of that, you wake up from that and you come to realize that you got to start living in the day. You can't, it could be taken away from you tomorrow. And so you got to be present and you got to live each day and take the most you can from that day, because that's living, because you're going to make a choice. You're either dying, because we're all dying, or you're living. And if you make the choice that you're living, then you're going to make the most out of each day that you're given, and you're going to feel blessed by that. You're going to be grateful for that.
And that's really good. And I want to start from beginning where you grew up at, and then we're going to progress through your life, if that's okay. Where are you from?
So we moved around a lot when I was a kid. My father was an electrical engineer by training. He took us to Oklahoma, and we lived in Oklahoma for a little while. And then my mom was from Southern California, and she hated Oklahoma. And so she packed us in a plane and moved back with her parents. And so one of the famous things my dad always said was, never marry a woman from Southern California, because no matter where you go,
they're going to want to come back.
It's not going to be as good as they had it. So anyway, so of course what I did was marry a woman from Southern California. But anyway, so he got eaten up by alcohol, and then so we ended up, he left, and then my mom worked retail, and she's a really interesting cat. I mean, she worked her ass off. She didn't have any education, and she just worked retail and minimum wage jobs. And so anyway, so I went to school and went to work, and we had, and it was just, and that was kind of my view of the world. It was just nothing else mattered but working. It's like working
Labor.
fixes everything, because if you don't have a job, you're screwed. And so it was always just this desperation of gotta have a job. So I had some fun jobs. I had a job working in a rabbitry, and I was maybe 13. I got paid $1 an hour, and all
$1 an hour,
$1 an hour,
wow.
and all the Coors beer I could drink.
I love that.
And working at the rabbitry, and just fun jobs, interesting things to do. I got into restaurants. Restaurants was, a nice, clean indoor job, and I did that. And then my dad was working on a tuna seiner. So he was working as an engineer on a tuna seiner out in the South Pacific, and he came back. And I had been working in the kitchens at these restaurants, and I was like, hey, get me a job as a cook on one of these tuna seiners. And my dad's like, no, you got to go to college. And I'm like, I don't think so.
You wasn't feeling college?
I'm not feeling college. I don't think so. So anyway, so he had a heart attack, and he ended up in public health hospital. And
How old were you then?
I was maybe 16, 17.
And did you have sisters and brothers during that time?
Yeah, I have a younger brother.
Okay, so younger brother.
Yeah.
And let me recap real quick so I'm following the story. So you and your father and your mother have you and your brother, and then they divorced. How old were you then?
They didn't divorce until I was in my 20s. They were just separated.
Separated, okay.
Yeah.
Did they live in the same town?
Sometimes.
Okay. And then you said that your father was had
alcohol problems. Yeah, he got eaten up by alcohol.
Okay.
So he, there's a history of it in that side of the family. So anyway, so he is in public health hospital, quadruple bypass. He in those days there was something called the Merchant Marine Act, and if you worked out at sea, you were entitled to public health hospital.
Right.
And so he met all these people, all these mariners, and he was fretting about me not wanting to go to school, and they were talking about the Maritime Academy. And so my dad was like, well, you could go to the Maritime Academy. And I said, well, I don't want to go to a Maritime Academy. But he's like, well, do that. Just go, see how it works out.
See if you like it.
See if you like it. If you don't like it, you can come back with me. I'll introduce you to, the guys on the boats. But go to the Maritime Academy first. And there was this woman. Her name was Diane. I do not remember her last name. But, in your life, there will be these like guardian angels. And Diana doesn't know me from Adam. Doesn't know me at all. And she just adopted me. And she got me all the money I needed to go to school. She got me scholarships. She got me grant money. She got me loan money. She was a wizard at it. She worked for the school. I mean, that's what she did. But I've never met. I mean, there's just some people in your life that'll give you a lift up.
She took special interest.
There's this woman that looked after me all 4 years, and I look back on her and I just think, I never thanked her. Maybe I did. I don't know. When you're that age and you grow up like that, you end up being a determined person, but you're also kind of an angry person, right?
Right.
And so and then you're not as grateful a person as you ought to be. You don't recognize the people that gave you the hands up. So anyway, I graduated. I had like a low B, and I had over 300 demerits. Now, if you
get in trouble,
if you get more than 65 demerits in a semester, you go before the board of review.
Right.
And then if you accumulate more than, and it was like, I don't remember, but it was like more than 200 and something, you go before the board of review. And so anyway, I took that to mean that it was a spending account. It was a bank account. and I could do what I wanted to do at up to that limit. And then I'd have to, play it straight. And really what I was doing was I had gotten a job on the oil docks, and I was working on the docks, and I was going out the back gate when I wasn't supposed to be going out the back gate, and working, and then I would come in the mornings, and I'd be late for formation, or my shoes would be dirty, or whatever the hell it was. But I wasn't necessarily a vandal or anything like that. That wasn't the point of the demerits. It was, but anyway, I treated them like a spending account. So anyway, I got to the end, and they put me on probation my senior year. So your senior year, you're supposed to have the most freedom. I had less freedom in my senior year than a first year cadet.
And what was the name of the school?
California Maritime Academy.
And it's a 4-year school?
It's a 4-year school. I have an undergrad in industrial technology.
Okay.
And I have a mariner's license. It's since been retired. And but I still have the license, but you can retire your license so that you don't have to give it up. So I don't keep up on it anymore.
And can you explain to the listeners what a mariner is?
So when I got out of school, I worked on oil tankers, and my job was as third officer in the wheelhouse. And so you're basically a navigational officer.
Oh,
you're there you're there to drive the ship. And then the other so merchant mariner means you're not in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
You're working for the private sector.
Okay.
And then you can get a part of the degree was you could get a commission in the Navy.
Okay.
As in the Naval Reserve. So you'd get your third mate's license, you'd get your bachelor's degree, Bachelor of Science, and you would get a commission in the reserves. So it's really kind of a cool package, right? I mean, that's and anybody out there, if you want to talk about it, I would recommend it highly. And that school has since evolved since I was there, and they offer multiple degrees there. It's part of the Cal State system now. It's got to be one of the best deals on the West Coast for going to school to get an engineering degree or a business degree. They have a degree there in marine transportation management also. So anyway, I did that, and then got to work on the oil tankers, and I did that for about 5 years, and then got married, and it got to be harder and harder to go out to sea. And so what would happen is when I was ashore, I would be marking the calendar of when I had to come back. And then when I was at sea, I'd be marking the calendar when I could go home.
Right.
And there's only two kinds of people that do that: people who are in jail and people who work on ships.
Yes.
Because you don't like your life, right? And so I'm making money, I'm doing all right, but I'm not liking my life. I'm not enjoying my life, and so I knew that I was going to have to do something different, and I was going to have to make the cut then, because if you buy a house and you start having kids and then you can't quit. You can't take a pay cut. You're stuck. And so I started looking around, and I looked at everyone who had an oil terminal on the West Coast, and because that's what I thought I knew how to do was move cargo, move oil. So I get this job with San Diego Gas and Electric, and my first job with them was actually as a meter reader. So I'm reading meters, and this woman, and then the guy that ran the procurement group goes to this woman who in HR, and he says, "Look, I need somebody that's got a maritime background. I've got all these maritime contracts because we're importing fuel oil for the utility to burn in the power plants."
Now, how long were you? Give me a timeline of this process. So you graduated from school. Right after that, how long before you got married?
4 years.
Okay, so 4 years you're working, then you got married, and then now you feel that it's time for a career change now.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so we went, so I started, so I quit and put a down payment on a house.
Where at?
In Murrieta.
Okay.
Just up the road, and started reading meters part-time. Just, I had a bank account from being at sea, right? If you spend enough time at sea, you don't really spend money, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I had a bank account, but it was so funny because I qualified for the loan and then quit my job. And I always thought, I wonder if that's okay.
Right.
But anyway, so we bought this little house in Murrieta for $90,000.
What? Wait.
Yeah.
What year was this?
So that would have been 87.
1987, $99,000. So you actually seen this city grow then?
Oh yeah, it's been huge.
Okay.
It's been huge, and we love this valley. But anyway, so I go to work. I'm working as a meter reader, and the guy ran the procurement group. Asks, I need somebody with a maritime background. I've got all these maritime contracts because we're importing fuel oil tankers. And she goes, well, I got this kid that reads meters, and but he went to the Maritime Academy. So Jim interviews me and hires me, and I don't know anything about business, zero about business. I worked on ships.
Right.
Okay. And I know you have a military background. You're going to respect this a little bit. That when you work on ships, you are super polite because you don't know how crazy the person next to you is. So keep going, or how are we doing? Yeah. So anyway, so I come in and I'm working in an office because you have to live together, right? You don't just work together, you live together, you eat together, you have to behave yourself.
Right.
But you go to work in an office and people are rude. And they talk to each other because they go home at night, you know, and it's just like you're a little shell shocked, right? You're like institutional guy. And so I swear for the first 6 months, I don't think I talked to anybody except my boss.
Right.
Because I was just, I don't know, just so shy, and I didn't know anything about business. And that was frustrating for me, you know? And so I started going to school at night to get my MBA. And
from what school?
San Diego State.
Okay, so you were already working in the field, so you had already gotten hired in a new position.
Yeah.
And then you were kind of not necessarily you were just uncomfortable with the lack of information or being familiar with the occupation, right?
Yeah, right. I didn't know anything about accounting. I didn't know anything about finance. I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. All my background was technical or operations.
Right.
So and I'm working in a business, and I'm writing contracts, budgets, all this stuff that you have to know. So anyway, I was going to school at night, and I then they sent me to ship chartering school. And so I went to New York, and I got to go to the World Trade Center and spend a month in New York learning how to charter ships. I learned a lot about contracts through that class. And then I was chartering ships to load with fuel oil to bring them to the West Coast.
Give me an example of what that entails. When you say you were chartering ships, like at what magnitude? Like what exactly were you doing it? And
so we were looking for 550,000 barrel tankers. So that would be like a medium-sized tanker.
Okay.
And but it would be so like the VLCCs, the very large crude carriers, you know, are 1 million barrels. This would be half that size. And we would use them to load fuel oil in Indonesia or Australia was typically where we were sourcing our fuel. And so I would charter the ship. And that was kind of fun because back in those days, everything was still done on telex. So I was like one of the last guys that knew how to operate the telex machine, because all the, you know, it was replaced by the fax machine, and then of course replaced by the the computer. But anyway, in those days we were still using telex,
Communicating that way.
with the telex, right? So you had to type out the contracts longhand.
Wow.
So you'd learn, you're right. You'd learn, and you'd also be very parsimonious about your words, right? You read contracts, and they've got, you know, tons of legalese in there, all this bollocks that goes into a contract. And but if you're doing it on a telex and you're typing it by hand, you can be very parsimonious about your words.
Mm-hmm.
And so and then there were standard terms, right? So you just reference the standard terms, and that would save you some typing.
Okay.
But in any event, so it was a great way to learn things. And then I started importing the fuel oil for the company. So that was the big job, the fuel oil buyer, right? So one of those cargoes would be 10 or 12 million bucks. And depending on the price of oil, like we had one cargo was $22 million. Wow, man. And that's back in the 90s, right? And so you know, you were so anyway, so that was, you know, that was very cool. And then I got the job doing the dispatch, and what that for the whole utility, and what that meant. Oh no, before that, the Natural Gas Act happened, and we were allowed to burn natural gas in the power plants instead of fuel oil.
Right.
So I started buying the natural gas, and so then I learned about the natural gas business. I learned about the pipeline grid. And then I got a job doing the dispatch for the whole system. And that was the make or buy decision. Are we going to make our own electricity, or are we going to buy electricity from the neighboring utilities?
Now, can you explain that for people who do not understand that, what the difference is?
Well, so we had power plants, right? And we had oil tanks that were full of oil, and we had, and our power plants were connected to the natural gas pipelines. And so we could, if fuel oil was cheap, we could burn fuel oil and make electricity.
Right.
If natural gas was cheap, we could burn natural gas and make electricity. And but if we could buy it from a neighboring utility and not have to make it ourselves, if they would sell it to it for less than what it cost us to make it, we would buy it from the neighboring utility. And as a practical matter, it always ended up to be some combination. You never, you always bought some, and you always generated some. And then the question was just the percentage of how much cheap electricity you'd maximize. And in those days, they called it economy energy that you'd buy on the grid. You buy as much of that as you can, and then what you couldn't buy, you generate in your own plant.
So at what capacity, as far as like, so give me an example of how much, when you're doing that, where does this energy go to?
So you're generating electricity, and this is the transmission level. These are the big transmission lines. And then San Diego Gas and Electric is a distribution utility, and so it comes off the transmission lines down to the distribution lines, and those are the smaller wires that you see around town. And then off of the distribution wires, it steps down again and goes to your home or your business. And so this is all the electricity for San Diego County and the southern half of Orange County, that when you walk to your light switch and flip your switch on, that's the electricity. That's how. So I'm working on the wholesale side, and then the retail side is, the rest of us just flipping the switch on at our house or at our business.
That's super interesting, because see, this is a type of I've never had any conversation like this, and it's intriguing to me because people just go and flip the switch, and they don't understand what the logistical and the business side of that and where the energy comes from, right?
Yeah. So,
I understand wholesaling, and that's bulk, and then retail is basically at the individual level for people who don't understand.
Yeah.
So how is this broken down into, is it by regions in the state, or is it, at what capacity? Are you communicating with people on the East Coast?
So really fascinating. So, and that would be the point of everything at some level, is if you're in the energy business, you're in a global business, and you're always looking outward. And what happens in the Middle East matters. What happens in Europe matters. What happens in the East Coast matters. And and you're talking to people. And so you got this job that's always outwardly focused. And I can't think, and it's always fun. It's always interesting. You're
it's
always
changing.
going to learn stuff. And so that is it's just been, I kind of fell into a career that I've found to be endlessly fascinating for 40 years. And it's always changed, right? Remember, I was doing ships.
Right.
Well, actually, I was doing, working on contracts on docks, ships, fuel oil, natural gas, electricity. And then I got this job. They moved me into finance. I got my MBA. They moved me into finance and had deregulated the power market. This was the late 90s. And I don't know if you remember that. But anyway, they deregulated the power market. And so the company was building power plants outside of the utility structure, independent power plants.
Right.
Merchant power plants. And then in Mexico, they had at the same time, they had an energy reform in Mexico where private companies could own pipelines and distribution systems and power plants. And so not only was the company building power plants in the US, we were building power plants and gas distribution systems and pipelines in Mexico.
Now,
and so we were bidding on concessions to build energy assets in Mexico. And that was like mid-90s. It was just endlessly fascinating.
And so building in Mexico, when you were starting to build, when you were seeing that come to fruition, were there any type of challenges that you faced or the company faced that were, it's different over there, obviously. And there's
you learned all kinds of stuff, right? And so one of the things that was, but everything builds on something, right? It's like, or I guess in my life, everything's like what I learned before was was useful for going forward. And one of the things working in Indonesia and buying oil in Indonesia and Australia is understanding different business norms. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you got to learn the culture and communication.
The culture and the communication. And one of the fundamental thing is that, the Western countries, the industrialized countries, we rely on courts to enforce contracts.
Right.
And so we're very, very, we can do a lot of business with total strangers, and we will rely on the courts to enforce contracts.
Right.
Rest of the world doesn't have that luxury. The rest of the world does not trust their courts, does not. So when you hear things like rule of law, what they're really talking about is enforcement of contracts and how does commerce work? How does trade work? And so in countries where you have weak court systems and nobody wants to be involved with the courts, you have to have a relationship with somebody you're doing business with. You have to know that they're going to go ahead and perform, right? And so that makes, the business, if you're not in a Western country, that's why relationships matter. That's why they have to know you. And that's why if you get some business done and you perform, they become very loyal because nobody wants problems. Nobody wants to end up in court. Business has to happen. So anyway, that's really, really different or something that's very basic to learn. The other thing that's basic to learn is when you have you're doing business in countries like that, you want to have a local partner. And because the local partner is going to keep you out of trouble.
They know how to navigate.
They know how to navigate, and they'll keep you out of trouble. And if you don't have a local partner, you're just, hi y'all,
Yeah.
You're going to get screwed because nobody has a vested interest in whether or not you're successful. You're going to get screwed. You're going to make a mistake and you're going to have a bad outcome. So local partners, super important. One of the things that we learned was that the building things
if we took our engineers who were used to doing business in California and used them for estimating construction costs in Mexico, it'd be way out. We were going to have terrible bids. You know, because they're so used to a particular, you know, standard of care, cost of things, what you pay for things. You're just going to be way out on pricing. So you had to have local engineers.
Right.
You had to have local construction companies.
The standard of business is going to be different if you're doing.
We had to learn that, and we failed when we were trying to use our engineers. And then we figured that out pretty quickly. We were going to have to hire engineers in Mexico to be successful, and we were super successful. We got 3 concessions for distribution systems. We got a pipeline done. I had a 3 power plant package, joint venture with Mitsubishi, the Japanese, and the Japanese are their whole thing, a whole nother thing together too, right? I mean, another business culture different than ours,
right?
And it's just endlessly fun, right? And so you learn things. Was to do the commercial agreements. By then, it was like that was what I was known for, was putting the fuel in a power plant, sourcing the fuel for a gas distribution system or a pipeline, or writing the contracts for selling the offtake from the power plants, or putting together the tariffs for selling the natural gas off of the distribution utilities. So I got to do a lot of stuff, got to learn a lot of stuff in
for this industry. Is this the type of industry where, and I want to go back to the family also, because we want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about the progression of your career, your 40-year tenure. So now, wife's in California.
Yeah.
Did this job require for you to do a lot of traveling?
It did. I traveled a lot and spent a lot of time. So we had plants that we were building. We had a plant that we were building in Nevada. We had a plant that we were building in the Central Valley. We had plants in Texas, and then we had the distribution systems in Mexico, and so a lot of travel. And it was interesting too, because when we met, I was working at sea, and I would be gone long sections of time, right?
How much time?
3 months, 4 months at a time.
And then how much time back home?
2.
Okay, so 3, 2.
Yeah.
3 at sea, 2 home.
Yeah.
It's almost like the military, man.
It is.
I need to give you an honorary Marine Corps badge or something.
Well, remember I told you I had all those demerits?
Right.
I didn't get accepted to remember I told you could get a commission in the Navy?
Right.
The one thing that doing that did was it kept me out of the Navy, which was probably okay, because a lot of my friends ended up getting called up and going over to that first Iraq War.
Right.
And they weren't, and they were working on the military sea lift command ships, where civilians, operate the tankers and operate the cargo ships. So, and interrupted their careers. And typically the Navy didn't pay as well as what they were getting in private.
That's for sure.
So anyway, so it's not for everybody, but in our case, it worked out. She was, I have always traveled, and she doesn't like to travel. And from time to time, I tried to get her to move to San Diego, so I wouldn't have to drive down to San Diego. And I tried to get her to move to New York.
She's
and she always said the same thing. You travel all the time. Why should I move? And she just never moved. And so my kids grew up here. They grew up in Temecula, and they grew up with the town. Like you said, I was here when there was nothing here, and they grew up with the town. And you can go almost anywhere in this town with one of my kids, and someone will know them. They'll know somebody. My daughter she was in her 20s, and she went over to somebody's house, mother's house. And there was a picture of my daughter in the hallway when she was in preschool, because her and this person who they'd lost track of each other went to preschool together. She's like, oh, that's me. I'm on the wall in your house.
Right.
And she grew up with the town. So she's same with my son. So that's been great. I mean, that's, they didn't travel around like I traveled around.
Right.
They had a lot of stability in their life, and that was good, and that's a blessing, right? That's a blessing. You don't take that for granted.
Now, one thing that I do know is I did get the experience for your son getting his postgraduate degree.
Right. That's right.
And I never knew about your kids being adopted.
Oh yeah.
And that's a very, very, and I was so taken aback because of speaking about how your wife was fighting for them to do certain things and taking care of the family, and how much love I saw here and so many people showing up here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, okay, I don't know how much I want to go in, but Zachary came from extremely difficult circumstances, and he was actually he was born at Naval Balboa Hospital. The woman was a crack addict, and he lived on the street with her, and he finally got captured by by social services up here in Riverside County.
Wow.
And so he was living in foster care, and he was like 2.5, and he was a wild thing. I mean, there was a bunch of foster kids. He was the littlest. He screamed like a banshee because that was how he got attention. If you messed with him, he'd bite you, and that's how he defended himself.
Right.
I mean, he was just a wild thing. And so we brought him home, and we had already adopted Pamela, and Pamela was like 4 when we brought Zachary home, and we just brought this wild 2-year-old into our house. And Pamela, I remember one time was like, gets up on our bed, and she's looking at me, trying to stare me in the eyes, and she goes, I told you I wanted a little sister. If you had listened to me, none of this would have happened. Take him back. And Belinda, of course, was not going to take him back.
Yeah.
And it was really a battle of wills. It was rock meets hard thing. And she just would not bend, and she just I don't know. He goes to high school, and he's a freshman in high school, and for whatever reason, I still don't know to this day why, but for whatever reason, he was having transitional problems, and he was throwing his homework away, and he wasn't doing his homework. And then when they would send the notes home, he would sign those and turn them back in. And so Belinda had no idea until he gets his first report card.
Right.
And he's got D's and F's. Belinda loses her mind. And for all of you that have been married, you understand what a woman losing her mind can look like. Or if you have a mom that's ever just unleashed, she lost her mind. She was like, she emptied out his bedroom. She took everything out of his bedroom. She took it, and he's a freshman, right? So he's that transitional age. So he's got toys, and he's got books, and he's that transitional age, junior high to high school. She takes everything out. She's got everything, his clothes, his underwear, everything, and she puts it in our room. And he would come, and he would have to ask her if he wanted clothes,
anything.
If he wanted it, he had to ask her for it. And she would say, if you had not been throwing your homework in the trash, you would not be standing here right now asking me for underpants. and she just would not let on that kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he and like, you know, I can be mad. It could happen. I could be mad for half an hour.
Right.
I just can't sustain it.
Right.
She could sustain it. She did not let it go. And he came back with mostly A's and a couple of B's. I mean, he turned it around. And then at one point, I think it was probably his junior year, he goes, well, I want to go to medical school. And I'm like, oh man, you know, I don't think you got the grades for it. You don't test that well, and you don't have the grades for it. He throws a fit. He just blows up. You don't believe in me. You never believed in me.
But that's probably what, you know what?
I'm going to prove you wrong. And I'm like,
that's
whoa.
probably the best thing, because
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, man, you have done an amazing, you are an amazing father.
Yeah.
And seeing your son and seeing your daughter.
Yeah.
And where they came from and where they're at today.
Yeah.
You can contribute that to your parenting and also your wife.
Oh, she's
putting her foot down.
She's cool.
Right?
Yeah. She
Shout
should
out to
be
Belinda.
extremely proud.
Yeah.
She's extremely proud, you know, and I try to tell her, man, you know, you did a great job. You did a fantastic job. And, you know, I've worked my whole life, but nobody is going to care that, you know, I did this oil deal or I did this this transmission deal. Nobody's going to care. But those kids are going to have kids, and those kids are going to have kids. And that legacy that she created with these kids that came out of the system is gonna last forever.
And
right?
I'm glad that you said that, because, right, I believe that, you know, a lot of the times, you know, the queen doesn't get the recognition that they deserve, right?
Yeah.
And I've been able to see your grandson. I had the ability to spend some quality time with him.
Oh yeah.
Okay, he's a rock star.
I love that kid.
Right?
Yeah.
And I also had an opportunity to meet Pam and your son, and just seeing so many people being here. I think that's what I have a question. Is that your greatest accomplishment?
Oh, the kids?
Yes.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, it's like I said, that's the thing that lasts forever. You know, that goes on forever. You know, not to get too much into this, but the Apostle John, you know, it's what are the greatest? Well, it's hope, faith, and love. And what's the greatest? It's love, because love goes on forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the love you put into the world is what stays. You know, we all pass away, but it's that love that you leave in the world, and that is your greatest accomplishment.
And you know what? You know, all of the super successful people like yourself that I've had the opportunity of interviewing, they really don't talk. They really don't talk much about themselves.
Yeah.
And you know, when you saying that, it's always in alignment with how many people that you've helped and served, right? And I could see it when you had the graduation party, people running around here, people talking about everything. And for your daughter, her getting into the medical field, we were discussing that earlier. How do you feel like your parenting helped navigate her through that decision?
So that was one of those things where Belinda and I got crosswise, and she wanted to go to junior college with her girlfriends and get an apartment in Orange County. And I was like, that's a terrible idea.
Right.
That's never going to work. And so, and it didn't, you know, and then she met a guy, and then a couple of years later, you know, she starts school, and she gets a degree, and she's working on a degree in early childhood development.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to work at a preschool? You know, what are you going to do with that? So anyway, so then she has the baby, and then she gets a job, and then she changes her major, and she does medical assisting. And so now she's working as a medical assistant, making $12 an hour. And there's nurses there that are making $40, $50 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just, the switch goes off. She goes, I'm as smart as they are.
She can do it.
I can do that.
Right.
And so she comes back and she says, hey, I want to go to nursing school. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's a horrible job. That's a disgusting job. I would never do that. But anyway, she's like, I want to do it. And you're like, you really want to do it? Yes, I really, really want to do it. Okay. So she moves back in with us. She brings the grandbaby with her, which is a plus. Belinda loves that grandbaby. And she's working and she's going to nursing school. And she did it. It took her 3.5 years.
That's fantastic.
To get her RN, and she did it, and she worked the whole time, which I admire. And Belinda they lived with us, so Belinda was always there for her and there for Kaysen. So Kaysen grows up with grandma. You know, those two are super tight.
Yes.
And so anyway, so it's just fantastic, you know. And now she's just a cool person, you know. And she kind of wobbled, right? And I would tell her, I would say, hey, relax. Just imagine that you got 100 years to get this right.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you have 100 years or you're going to be wiped out next week by a bus, but just imagine you got 100 years. This is not a race.
I love that.
Just keep moving forward. As long as you're moving forward, just don't stop moving. But it's not a race. And she wandered a little bit. She had to figure some stuff out for herself, and she did. And I think that all of us have to do that at some point. We have to figure stuff out for ourselves. Our parents can't we can't pour that into your head. We have to figure it out for ourselves. And she wandered a little bit, and then she figured it out, and she's got a nice life. She bought her own house. She's
with a big
very
old pool
independent.
in the back.
She's got a swimming pool in the back.
And that's good because, and I believe that structure, that you guys created with love being the foundation and giving them the, enough bandwidth to be able to make their own mistakes and pave their own way.
Yeah.
Is why they were both successful versus suppressing them and trying to make them do what you feel that they needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that.
It's a great story.
I believe that.
Now, Zach, we talked about Pam. Let's talk about brother Zach. Okay.
Yeah.
So I know that the last time that we were here, he was on a venture.
Yeah.
What can you talk about that? And then we're going to go back to your career after your
Oh, sure. So he again, and it's sort of super curious mind. I mean, Zach is an interesting person. He's fun to be around. He's got a very curious mind, and there's pluses and minuses to that, right? Because you get easily distracted. Mm-hmm. And
sounds like me.
Yeah, right. It's just all that energy and all that curiosity. And so he's getting his undergrad at La Sierra, right? And he takes this job working in the lab for this guy, the herpetology lab. And so he gets to know this guy, and they become. He takes a fondness for Zach. He takes him under his wing, and so anyway, so it's come time to go to medical school because he's graduating. And so Dr. Hayes goes to Zach. He goes, look, why don't you come to Loma Linda, get a master's in biology, work in the lab with me, and I'll give you a full ride, and I'll pay you to work in the lab. And Zach comes to me, well, I want to go to medical school, but I've got this opportunity here. What do you think I should do? I said, take the master's degree.
Right.
Do it. Just do it. And get the master's degree, right? You're young. You got time. Do it. So he does it. And while he's there working on the master's program, there's over in the neuroscience department, there's a professor there that runs that department, and they're experimenting with rattlesnake venom. And what they're doing with rattlesnake venom is they're disaggregating it,
Making medicine.
to make medicine. And he comes to Dr. Hayes and he says, hey, I got a lot of postdocs here that know a lot about the brain, but they don't know anything about venom and snakes. Do you have a kid that you'd like to recommend to come over to my neuroscience lab? So he recommends Zachary. And so what they do is they say, okay, you'll come to work for me, you'll get a PhD, we'll pay for your PhD, all your tuition, and we'll double your lab stipend.
Wow.
And so you go to work in the lab for me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just this random walk, right? But just keep moving forward, and these doors open and these opportunities. And if your eyes are open and you're ready to take the opportunity, you know, it happens, and it did. And so anyway, he did that. And so now he's so he got his PhD, and that's really cool too, right? Imagine going to get a PhD, and then you have to think up some way to advance science, right? That's what you have to. And I'm going to advance science, and I'm going to imagine this, right? It's like, no, he had a program. They already had a program. They already knew what they were going to do. Mm-hmm. They were going to disaggregate the venom, like you said. They were going to, you know, run a series of trials and tests on it, and he was going to run those trials and tests for the professor, and then he was going to collate the results and write his PhD thesis. Right? It was packaged, and I'm like, that's smart, right? Because if you don't, you end up wandering around. You know, you hear these guys. I've got a friend, never got his PhD.
Right.
You know, they wander around for 5 or 6 years, and they never complete their dissertation. You know, and it's like, no, this was perfect for somebody like Zachary, who needs this combination of intellectual stimuli but focus, right?
Right.
Because that was my biggest fear. If he went to a school with 50,000 students, I was afraid he would get lost. So he goes to La Sierra. It's a small school. You know, it was a fantastic experience for him. And if you go to a small school like I did, like he did, when you don't show up for class, people notice.
Right.
When I went to San Diego State with 50,000 people, if I didn't show up for class, nobody noticed.
Right.
Right? You could just get lost. And that's what happened to my daughter. But where Zach, you know, the small school, there's not that many degrees there, so you can't wander too far off of what you're there to do, which is, you know, get that degree and move on to the next thing. So he got his degree. He's teaching. He's teaching at South Coast Medical School. It's a medical school. He's teaching medicine students, and then he's studying. He wants to be a medical doctor. He still wants to be a medical doctor. He has his PhD, but he wants to be a clinician. He wants the hands-on. He doesn't want to work in research. He wants the hands-on. He wants to be a doctor. So, and he'll do it. You know, he's proven he'll do it.
Now, I remember back in your story, you said that someone gave. I'm looking at the progression of your life, and a lady gave you an opportunity.
Yeah, Diane.
Yeah. Right? You gave the children an opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was fantastic, right?
And then now that Zach, someone gave him an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing, right?
Yeah, it does, right?
Right. When you
it's
put
neat.
I do like I'm going to, you know, I really, really like what you said about, you know, what's the rush?
Yeah.
You know, just keep moving.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the key takeaways that we could take from the audience. It doesn't matter where you're at in life. If you're focused on a goal and you're continuing to put one foot in front of the other, eventually those roots will bear fruit. Would you agree?
Oh, I totally believe that.
Now, let's talk about the 40 years of being in this same industry. Is that normal for someone to go into industry that you're in and build an immense amount of wealth and then stay in the industry, or do you think people? What's usually the tenure for that type of career?
Wow. Well,
You have to
one
be
of the
good at
things
it.
about a career like that is I think you have to remember though that let's say for example that there are people that just stay in pipelines
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they know. And it's like, okay, but commodities um, go up and down. And so if you're in a down cycle and you're in natural gas and natural gas is the market is flat and it's not doing anything,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do? Are you just go, oh, well, I guess I'll do nothing until the market comes back? And it's like, I couldn't live like that, that fear of not being employed, has always been there. It's always, I've got to
You
have
got
a
to
job.
progress, right?
I have to have a job. And I don't necessarily, and so I'm kind of a bad example of, but it's made for a great life because when, it was always the next thing. So when doing natural gas and then doing electricity, and I got to learn and do something else. And then I went to work. I left the utility, was my old boss gave me a job over in the trading company,
Mm-hmm.
but my job was going to be to develop energy assets for the trading company to trade around. And then she ended up getting offered a job at Shell. And so she took that job at Shell to build a gas and power trading business for Shell. And then she brought me over to do the assets to underpin this gas and power trading business. And so we did a couple of liquefied natural gas terminals. And I got to put the commercial agreements around these huge liquefied natural gas terminals. It's like, and now for something completely different, right? But it's not completely different. It's just, it's the energy field. It's a different kind of asset. But there will be people who've, they've done LNG, and when LNG is, slow, like I remember the transmission engineers at the utility. There was a guy there that had been working on the same transmission project, never built, just planned for 15 years.
Wow,
I'm like, how can you live like that? I would be bored out of my skull.
right.
So anyway, so my thing is that as these markets move, is you always want to play the hot corner. Go where the money goes. If so, like right now, if in natural gas, this last company that I just retired from, they gave me a very nice watch.
It's nice.
They built these pipelines in West Texas, and what was happening was the shale revolution. That all these drilling, all these oil and gas companies, all of the money was flowing to West Texas. So that's where all the infrastructure was going to be built. And so we went to West Texas and started building pipelines in West Texas. And it just blew up. Right? Why? Because we were standing in front of where the money was going. And so right now we're having a huge investment cycle in liquefied natural gas terminals, where the U.S. is right now neck and neck with Qatar as the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas.
That's interesting.
And so that's where all the money's going. And so what happens? Well, what happens is this thing that I worked on 20 years ago, worked in natural gas terminals for Shell. Suddenly it's alive today. And I'm like, okay, it's time to go work on liquefied natural gas terminals. Same thing with the pipelines. The pipelines were going to be a big deal back in 2017. It's like 2016. It's time to go work on pipelines, and just follow the money. Where's the investment going? And because that's going to be the hot corner, and that's where you're going to have the most fun. it's that part of the investment cycle that is the most fun, right? Because things are happening. Once a business matures and levels out, now it's dull. You know, it's that part of the curve, and it's living in that part of the curve and being able to adapt to is just made for a really great career for me.
So for those listeners, you might want to invest in liquefied natural gas. If you want to be wealthy, you got that from here, man. So all I want is a 6-pack of Coca-Cola, guys, for that information, for bringing brother Travis on the show. So now what made you what was the decision to retire? What made you say, oh, you know what? Because I know you've had some you're a fighter.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you had some challenges. What was the factor to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and hang it up?
So I think the first thing is, so anyway, so I had the heart attack, and then I've had some problems with the same bacteria that got into my heart got into my spine. So I had been on long-term disability for about 1.5 years. And so I had gotten distant from the company. Mm-hmm. You know, the company had moved on without me. That's one thing. The other thing is I don't really have the stamina to work full time. I just don't. I get tired, and so I want to take a nap. And if I want to take a nap, I'm going to take a nap. And so, and that makes for a better day for me. And, right. And I can't work in the evenings anymore either. I just don't have it. And I know it. So the other thing that with WhiteWater was in the gas pipelines is, remember I told you it was really fun. That part of the curve, the ramp up, was extremely fun, and right. and we put about $20 billion worth of capital to work. Wow. In 6 years. I mean, when I talk about it blew up, and it was so anyway, so it was a fantastic ride, right? But now the company is focused on just organic growth,
right?
We're not. And it's just all one extension of the existing systems. And so there's really nothing for me to do. And like I said, I've been out for 1.5 years. And so it was kind of that decision of, there's really nothing really, you know, what am I going to do? You guys are, you know, you're in that mature phase of the organization. And I've been out for so long, I'm kind of disconnected from the team. So I left WhiteWater. Now I have a consulting business.
That's what I wanted to cover next.
Yeah, and so I have one client right now, and he's got a couple of projects, and it works out really well for me. You know, I can help him on those projects, and but it's not a full-time job.
Indeed, and well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show. Yeah. Congratulations on your 40 years in the industry.
Yeah.
And getting those, you know, your 2 loved ones, your 2 kids out there yeah. with your lovely wife out there, and the, you know, being able to put them on the path to success. Yeah. And now you've already accomplished what you've accomplished. And it's great to see you hooking and jabbing still.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Your mind is sharp, and I'm super excited for what the consulting industry has to offer. What is the name of the business?
Oh, it's Arbor Glen Consulting.
Okay.
I just like the name. It's hilarious, right?
Name. I like the last name, Glenn.
Yeah, that's
with
right.
2 N's. Okay, so
yeah.
So Arbor Glen Consulting, and then what do you provide? What?
Well, so it's people know me, right? It's like people know me, and so if you've got a project, an energy project, and you need somebody to help you on the business development side, and typically speaking, it's going to be on the commercial side. And so, like in the case of Talk, which is the company I'm working for now, he's developing an ethane terminal, and he's developing a. And so I advise on locations. I advise on. I do project vetting. Basically, it would be something that people would typically call me out for, and then and that would be like a short-term sort of a thing. But in this case, where it's full-on business development, it's a lot more fun for me.
Because it's in that curve for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So you're living on the wave.
It's where I want to be. Yeah.
Right.
It's where I've learned. It's where I'm happy.
Well, I want to tell you, your business acumen is unmatched, especially with 40 years, just from my dialogue with you. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show, because a lot of people don't know. They see all of the success, but they don't know where it started at. Right. And it seems like you want to help organizations get at a higher level because you helped all of these other companies get there. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the best way to reach you?
So Arlin Travis, Travis, ATRAVIS at agcllc.org.
Okay.
That would be the business.
So for those of you looking to get consultation into energy or consulting on establishing, an energy business, this is the best way to reach them. And I want to say thank you again for being on the show. I know that whatever you put your hands on is going to turn good.
Oh, fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited to see where your consulting business goes in the future.
Yeah, me too.
Now I gotta get in this big old pool you got back here in the background.
Oh yeah, isn't that cool?
Yes, it's magnificent.
It's super cool.
So, thank you. It's an honor again to have you on the show, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate you, Tony. You're a good neighbor.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
You too.
Good.